Marcus Webb looked at his wife of 14 years, pointed at the camera, and said, "She shouldn't even be up here. She's too ugly for television." The words hit the studio like a fist. Diane Webb stood at the Family Feud podium in a yellow dress she had bought on clearance 2 weeks before the taping, her hands clasped in front of her, her chin still lifted, her eyes not flinching. The audience went quiet in a way it hadn't all episode. Not the usual game show pause. A different kind of silence entirely. Steve Harvey, who has hosted this show through floods and fistfights and 30 years of unscripted human chaos, froze mid-step. His smile disappeared. He placed his cards slowly on the podium. And then he did something he had never done in 23 seasons. He walked away from the game entirely. It was a Tuesday in March, taping day at the ImageWorks studios in Atlanta, Georgia. The Webb family had driven 6 hours from Mobile, Alabama, in a rented minivan. Diane, Marcus, their teenage daughter Keisha, Diane's sister Rochelle, and Rochelle's husband Dale. They'd been selected after a casting call 6 months earlier. A process that had taken 3 interviews and a background check and a lot of hope. Diane had pressed her yellow dress the night before. Keisha had done her mother's hair. Rochelle had brought a bag of snacks for the ride and had not stopped talking from the Georgia state line to the studio parking lot. The Webb family was funny, loud, and competitive in the way that families who have survived things together tend to be. They laughed hard and argued louder. In the green room before the taping, Diane had made everyone laugh by doing a spot-on impression of a game show contestant who faints at the board. Keisha had laughed until she cried. Even Marcus had laughed, or at least he had smiled, which was the closest he usually got. But nobody in that studio knew what was living behind Diane Webb's yellow dress and pressed smile. Diane had been diagnosed with alopecia universalis when she was 31. By 34, she had lost every strand of hair on her body. She had learned to do her makeup without eyebrows, learned to carry herself without eyelashes, learned to answer the question, "What happened to you?" with a practiced, easy smile that gave nothing away. She had been wearing wigs for 9 years. The one she wore to the taping that Tuesday was a rich auburn, shoulder length, the nicest one she owned. She had ordered it online in December and paid for it in 3 installments. The bullying had started in middle school, when her hair began thinning in patches, and it had never fully stopped. As a grown woman, she encountered strangers who stared too long in grocery stores, co-workers who whispered, a neighbor who had once told her she looked like she was sick. She had developed the kind of quiet, irrefutable dignity that only comes from having your appearance questioned so many times that you stop needing the question answered. Marcus had known about the alopecia since their first year together. He had seen her without her wig. He had held her in the dark when she cried about it. Or at least that was who he used to be. Something had shifted in the last few years. The teasing had started small, private, the kind of thing Diane told herself was just his sense of humor. And then it had grown heavier, and it had stopped being funny, and she had started doing her hair before he woke up in the morning so he wouldn't say anything. Their daughter Keisha, who was 16 and sharper than either of her parents fully recognized, had said something to her mother the week before the taping. They were in the bathroom together, Diane adjusting her wig in the mirror, and Keisha had said, without looking up from her phone, "Mama, why do you always hide yourself when Daddy walks in?" Diane had not answered. The game had been going well. The Webbs were competitive, loud, and sharp, and they had been in the lead through 3 rounds. The audience liked them. Steve liked them. There was an easy energy in the studio, the kind that makes good television. And then, between rounds, while the stage manager was adjusting a mic, Marcus leaned toward the camera and said it. "She shouldn't even be up here. She's too ugly for television. He said it with a grin, the kind of grin that has learned to disguise itself as a joke. The studio fell completely silent. Steve Harvey had his back to Marcus when the words landed. He turned slowly. His face had changed. The broadcast smile was gone. What replaced it was something older and quieter and considerably more dangerous. He looked at Marcus for a long moment. He looked at Diane. And then, he said, "Stop everything." A producer at the edge of the stage made a small movement toward the floor manager. Steve held up one hand without looking at him. I said stop. He walked toward Diane first, not Marcus. Diane, he stood in front of her and he said, in a voice the entire studio could hear, "Are you all right?" Diane's chin was still up. Her hands were still clasped. She gave a small, practiced smile and said, "I'm fine." And Steve looked at her for exactly the kind of moment that makes television crews stop what they are doing, and he said, "No, that's not what I asked you. I asked if you were all right." The audience did not make a sound. Diane Webb, 9 years of practice, 38 years of learning to deflect, 14 years of marriage, and one 16-year-old daughter who had asked her a question she never answered. She stood at the Family Feud podium in her clearance yellow dress, and she said, very quietly, "I haven't been for a while." Steve Harvey stepped back. His shoulders moved. He pressed his handkerchief to the corner of his eye. He turned to the audience, to the cameras, to the 300 people sitting completely still in that studio, and he said, "I want to talk to everyone watching at home right now." Then he turned to Marcus. What followed was not a speech. It was not a lecture. It was not the kind of moment that television manufactures. Steve Harvey said 8 sentences to Marcus Webb, and none of them were loud, and all of them were precise. He said that a man who loves a woman doesn't announce her flaws to a camera. He said that a husband's job, his only job, is to be the loudest voice in the room telling his wife she is extraordinary. He said he had been homeless. He had been broke. He had been laughed at. And the only thing that had ever shamed him was when he had failed the people who loved him. "The camera doesn't make you ugly," Steve said. "The camera just shows us who you already are." He wasn't finished. Steve turned to Diane and he said, "I don't know your whole story, but I know a woman who has been carrying something heavy for a long time, and I know what it looks like when somebody has stopped helping her carry it." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, right there on the taping floor, a thing hosts simply do not do during live production. He called his personal stylist, a woman named Gloria, who had worked with him for 11 years. He put the call on speaker. He said, "Gloria, I'm on the Family Feud stage and I've got a woman here who I need you to take care of." Gloria did not hesitate. She said, "Tell me what she needs." Steve Harvey announced that day, in front of the full studio audience, that Diane Webb would receive a complete wardrobe consultation, a year of styling sessions, and a personal introduction to a specialist in custom hairpieces for women with alopecia, paid for entirely out of Steve's own pocket. The audience erupted. But Steve held up his hand again. He wasn't done. He looked at Keisha, the 16-year-old who had done her mother's hair that morning. He said, "How old are you?" Keisha said, 16. Steve nodded. "Watch your mama right now. What she does in the next 5 minutes. That's what strength looks like. You remember this?" He announced that both families would receive the day's prize. The competing family, the Garcias from Phoenix, had stopped playing and were standing at their podium in total silence. Rosa Garcia, the grandmother, had her hand pressed to her mouth. When Steve made the announcement, Rosa crossed the stage without being asked. She took Diane's hands in both of hers and she said, You are beautiful. I want you to know that." Diane Webb, who had held her composure through everything, finally lost it. Her shoulders dropped. The practiced smile disappeared. She wept. Keisha was across the stage in 3 steps. The episode aired 6 weeks later. The clip of Steve Harvey's 8-sentence response to Marcus Webb reached 240 million views in the first 11 days. It trended in 47 countries. The hashtag, #SheShouldBeUpHere, was used 9.4 million times in 72 hours. Diane Webb appeared on 3 morning shows and declined to discuss her marriage publicly, except to say that she and her daughter were doing well. 3 months after the taping, Diane Webb filed for divorce. She was represented by an attorney who took her case pro bono after seeing the clip. The judge granted her petition 9 months later. A year after that taping, Diane Webb launched a nonprofit organization called Yellow Dress Project, named for what she wore on the day she stopped pretending. The foundation provides styling resources, support groups, and medical consultations for women with alopecia and other visible conditions that affect self-image. To date, the Yellow Dress Project has served more than 400 women in 31 states. Steve Harvey appeared at the foundation's first annual gala in Birmingham, Alabama. He sat at a table with Diane and Keisha and said, in a speech that lasted 4 minutes, that the most important thing he had ever done on that show was stop the game. "Television is full of moments," he said. "But some moments are more important than the show." Keisha Webb, who watched her mother stand in a yellow dress with her chin up while the room went silent around her, is now enrolled in pre-law at the University of Alabama. She says she wants to be a family attorney. Today, if you search for Diane Webb, the first image that comes up is not from the taping. It is from the gala. She is standing at the podium in a gown the color of marigolds, laughing at something someone just said. Her wig replaced now by the natural look she has chosen to wear without apology. The picture has been shared more than 4 million times with a single caption that someone added and that nobody has been able to top. "She was always supposed to be up here." If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to know that the people who love you should be the loudest ones saying so. Have you ever watched someone finally stop carrying something alone? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more moments that remind us what real strength looks like.